Welcome to Northwest Book Talk. I'm your host, Patty Grasher. Join me as we explore the vibrant literary landscape of the Pacific Northwest. Each week, we dive into conversations with talented authors, insightful book coaches, and passionate booksellers. So whether you're a writer looking to hone your craft or a reader seeking your next great book, there's something here for book lovers in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. So let's get started. And today, my guest is Sue Dockstader. Sue has a unique story of her publishing journey. It begins with her mother in a small garden in England and journeys to Sue's writing and publishing in the Pacific Northwest. It's a fun and amazing journey, and Sue offers some insights to writing, publishing, and marketing home and abroad. So welcome, Sue, to the program.
Hi, Patty. Thank you so much for having me here today.
So let's start with just a little bit about your background. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I grew up in rural England. I started my life working as a lawyer. I left England on a wild adventure in 1986 to go work in Hong Kong, and haven't lived in England since then. Turned out that I met and married my husband Lee in Hong Kong. And since then, we've lived all over the States, but have not been back to live in the UK. We moved to Camas, about 7 years ago now, and love it. Love living here. I have two adult children, one who lives in Washington, D.C., and one who's over in Germany. I also have a dog, an 18-month-old Jack Russell mix who's called Charlie. He's a rescue, so we're not quite sure what he's mixed with, but he certainly keeps us on our toes and is certainly one of my writing muses. So having started in the UK, we've lived all over the place, and I've done umpteen different things depending on where we were living. I've worked as a nonprofit consultant. I've sold Asian antiques. And then since moving to Camas, I've been volunteering for a whole bunch of different nonprofits and actually started working as a mediator for the small claims court here. So I do still manage to get a little legal fix in here and there.
Well, that's very interesting. Very, very, what do you call it? Across the globe, both intellectually and geographically, I would say. Let's start
Yeah.
how you got started with writing these, or publishing, working with your mom to get these books going.
Yeah. So when I moved to Hong Kong, my mom was worried about my children losing touch with, where their grandma lived and anything to do with England. And she was sitting in her garden one day, and her dog was going crazy, barking at something under her shed. And she was like pondering what that could possibly be and thought, oh, it must be a mouse or something. And then the next day, there was a little hedgehog walking down her garden path. And she thought, oh, maybe they could be friends. Maybe that could be a story. And so she decided to write these imaginary or stories about this imaginary mouse and his adventures as a way to connect with her grandchildren and inspire them, with a love of the English countryside. So she would send my children letters and include a chapter that she had written about Henry, the mouse, he's called Henry, climbing the churchyard wall or falling in a muddy river or, discovering the delights of waking up on a snowy morning, whatever little escapade she had come up with that month. And it worked. It kept my kids interested in England. They loved their nature walks with their grandma when we were visiting, and they always would have a nature table with snails and feathers and all kinds of stuff that they picked up under the hedges around her house. And the stories she sent were typed on her manual typewriter and sent on airmail paper. And I kept them all. Basically, I never throw anything away, but I kept them all. And I always thought, I should do something with them. And over the years, I've done a lot of writing for different people and different processes. And, I've had some connection with book production. And I thought, well, how hard can it be? I should, at one point, I should make these stories into something. And so eventually I found an illustrator and got her to make a start on coming up with some pictures of mice and hedgehogs and water voles. And they were so fantastic. I thought, well, this is not just going to be a family scrapbook. This really could be, something that we could actually share with other people. But I still didn't really know what I was doing. I still didn't really know much about producing a book. So we didn't really enter into it in a commercial with a commercial mindset. I just got on with producing the book. And the first book I gave her completely as a surprise. She had no clue that was coming, and so that was really that was so fulfilling for me to know that I had been able to kind of give that gift to her, and she was absolutely thrilled. But once we'd done the first book, we still had a few more stories, and so we produced a second book. And then the illustrator said, "Oh, a trilogy is always nice." And so then, by this time, Mum was in her 80s. I mean, she wrote the original stories when we were in Hong Kong, like 25 years ago. And so I kept them for some while. But anyway, in her 80s, she thought, well, I can write a few more. And so then she wrote another whole set of stories, which gave us the third book. And that was, I thought that was it then. But she had other plans.
Yeah, I love the books myself. I've seen them, read them, and passed them on to people at the bookstore that I work at. So, but what were some of the marketing things that your mom did in England to sell the books?
She started off, she spoke to a couple of school groups. She found that rather tricky because the children were kind of wriggling and wiggling and not always the best audience. So that was one thing she did. And then we found out that there was a local radio station quite close to where she was living. And I had approached them and said, "Oh, you should interview my mom. She's a local celebrity. You need to get her on." And they did that. They interviewed her as on their kind of similar to this kind of a book talk program they had. But then they decided to actually start a story time slot where I think twice a week, they had Mum reading one of her stories. So it just makes me giggle that, my mum in her 80s had to walk about a mile to the radio station, sit down, read her story, and then a few days later it would be broadcast out to the local community, which was pretty exciting stuff in your 80s to start to learn how to record for the radio. So that was something new and different.
So were any of these put into form where you could hear them, or was it just something that?
Yes, yes. So the first few times I tried, I would get up at all kinds of weird times of the day and night to try and listen to them, and realized that she was doing she's a very good reader of stories. She does all the little voices and she wrote the book, so she kind of knows what she's trying to say. So she's a very animated reader. And yeah, I contacted the radio station and said, "Oh, please, can I have access to the recordings?" And they very kindly sent me the files. So all the recordings of Mum reading the stories are on our website. And my kids keep nagging at me and saying, "Make sure you've got them backed up. We need to make sure we keep those for posterity of having Mum reading her stories." So I've got them kind of in 2 or 3 different places. So I'm hoping that I've got them safe.
So I'm going to go back just a bit. What was it
Yeah.
like to produce the books? So you had the pictures, you had the story, and you had to put them into book form.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing. I'd done lots of writing over the years for other people, magazines, web content, and I'd done a little bit of book related work, but mainly just kind of helping people with ideas rather than actually producing a book. And, I kept thinking, oh, it can't be that difficult. But the editing just about drove me nuts because the illustrator we had who is lovely, but every time she tweaked an illustration, all the words would get messed up. And so I must have read those books like a million times. And I decided right from the beginning that I wasn't going to edit them too heavily. I wanted them to be Mum's words because, as I said, we didn't go into this project with a commercial mindset. I wasn't. I wanted to just preserve what my mom had written, but some places there was repetition or something didn't quite make sense. So I was editing it. So I was very cautious to edit it very lightly, so that it sounded like her and not like me. But as anybody who knows my mom, we actually sound very similar. We have a very similar kind of turn of phrase. And, when I'm reading her stories, her voice is so bold to me. I can hear her voice throughout everything she's written. And so it was actually much easier than I anticipated to edit and maintain her style. So I did try very hard to do that, but just, took out the bits that didn't quite make sense or where there was unnecessary repetition or whatever.
So you didn't have a publisher. I know in the beginning you didn't have them on like Amazon or something like that. So did you find a printer? What was your task for
Yeah,
that?
so again, not really knowing what I was doing, I just thought, okay, we've produced a book, we'll just find a printer and we'll just print a whole bunch of books. And so that's what we did. We just printed a few boxfuls. And the first print run was here in the States, and she was visiting at the time, and so that was fun that she was here as the boxes arrived, and we were able to sort of have fun together of unboxing the books. And then we quickly sold those, and then when we had book 2 and book 3, we found a printer in the UK, which made more sense because she was doing a lot of craft fairs and that kind of thing in the UK. So she really needed the books there. And then I realized that, Mom was getting older. She could only take the books to places she could get to on the bus. And so it wasn't really very practical for us to be selling them sort of by hand, as it were. And so then I looked into getting them online. And so unfortunately, we had to have them all reformatted so that they would work for print on demand. So now we have the books are all available through Ingram. And so they're on Amazon, and according to Ingram, they're available, wherever books are sold. So in theory, any bookstore can order them because they're in the Ingram catalog. So that we should have done that from the beginning, but we didn't know any better. So we had to go through a few false starts before we got to that point.
Yeah, I think that's probably every author's journey, that what we didn't know in the beginning. Tell us
Right.
about your current Henry project.
Yeah, so as I said, we had the 3 books, and I thought that was it. We were done with the 3 books, and I was starting to get more interested in my own writing because having been involved in the marketing of Mum's books, I'd been taking webinars and seminars and meeting with a lot of other authors, which had piqued my interest in trying to write more for myself. So I was trying to focus more on that. And then at the beginning of this year, Mum presented me with 4 more stories and said, oh, wouldn't it be lovely if we had a book published in my 90th year, because she was 90 in August. And I was thrilled and yet horrified because I had kind of hoped that I had moved on from Henry, but no, Mum had other plans. So she had written 4 more stories. So I was trying to think what on earth we could do, because I'd reached back out to the illustrator of the first three books, who was also quite elderly. And unfortunately, she had had a stroke and was not able to do the illustrations for these new stories. So I was at a bit of a loss as to what to do, and I was procrastinating like crazy. At one point, I was wandering around a bookstore and I saw these activity books, and I thought, oh, well, maybe that would be an idea. I could do something a little bit different and just include the stories as just a kind of a solid text, rather than trying to have a very heavily illustrated book. And perhaps we could try and use some of the art from the previous books, because I really wanted it to have the same look and feel of the previous books. So I went back to the designer who's actually in the UK, who helped me do the conversion from the regular print books to the print on demand books, and made this suggestion. And she was like, oh, yeah, I've done loads of activity books. That would be a great idea. And she already had all the files from the previous book, so she had access to all the art. So that's what we did. I basically came up with a whole bunch of ideas for mazes and word searches, and we already had some coloring pages. And then I came up with all kinds of fun facts about all the different animals, because there's lots of different animals in these books: hedgehog, water vole, donkey, horse, lots of mice. But also we've got rabbit, fox. So there was lots of different animals. So I thought it would be fun to have some little facts. So we ended up with it's going to be about 44 pages of activities, and then placed throughout the book are the 4 new stories. But of course, Mum always wanting to surprise me with something. When my husband and I were visiting England in the spring, we stayed at a local pub in her cute little village. And I noticed they had some books there for their guests. And I suggested they might like to have the Henry books. And they said, oh, we would love to have the Henry books. So Mum went down and delivered the Henry books. And the manager of the pub said, oh, wouldn't it be funny if Henry had an adventure in the pub? And so, of course, Mum wrote another book, another whole chapter about Henry and his mates having a night out at the pub. So then I had five stories. So the activity book is a bunch of different puzzles and things for kids to do, and then there's 5 complete stories in there as well. So they're sort of what I now know is a term called 5-minute stories. So it's like a quick bedtime story, or someone who's a little bit more confident could read them themselves if they're not still wanting to have a story read to them. But so we've got the 5 stories and a whole bunch of activities in this really colorful, beautifully illustrated book. And the designer, as I say, she's pulled the illustrations from the other books. So all our friends from the previous books are featured in there as well. So it turned out I just submitted everything to Ingram, and I also am going with KDP this time as well, with Amazon directly. And so the publication date will be November 12th. So the book will be available in plenty of time for the holidays.
Oh, that's nice. And do you plan on making it a set at any point?
Well, I mean, they're all in the same theme. They're all kind of matching, so they could definitely be sold as a set. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
I think you kind of already asked what's next for you and your mother, do you think? Or do you have?
Well, so she just celebrated her 90th birthday. She claims that now she's finished with her writing career, and she's just going to focus on her knitting. She knits for local charities, but she keeps threatening to write a book about how to build houses for the elderly, because she's constantly frustrated by challenges in houses that don't cater for the elderly. So who knows if maybe in the winter when it's too cold for her to get outside and do any gardening, she might start writing again. But I'm kind of hoping that we can focus on promoting what we've got, so that I can try and look into more of my own writing, because it in helping her, it really reinvigorated me to write fiction, because I've always been writing nonfiction, been writing content for other people, and so now I'm having a go at writing fiction. I'm writing a lot of memoir style fluff that I put on Medium, which is mainly focuses around the challenges of dealing with a retired husband and a feisty dog, and my life in the slow lane, which of course I think is hilarious, but who knows? But it's a nice way for me to kind of practice writing, because one thing I've realized, that writing a book, it's a long endeavor. When you're used to writing short pieces that you write 1,000 words and you send them off and they're done, and then you're on to the next thing, you get that sense of achievement quite frequently. Whereas when you're writing a novel, I mean, I've got 80,000 words, but it needs a lot of revisions, and it's going to take me forever to do that. And so being able to have an outlet to write short pieces is very welcome, because I need that reinforcement. I need to have something finished every now and then to kind of keep me going.
So tell us a little bit about your novel. Are you working with a coach? Are you just on your own? Or let's talk about your book.
So the book, as I say, I'm trying to write what I know. So I'm basically writing about an older woman who's a little bit fed up with being underestimated, and she's working to salvage a nonprofit from going under with the help of a misunderstood dog. So it's going to be a kind of a feel-good story that will resonate with dog lovers and kind of anyone who feels a bit disgruntled about being ignored and overlooked. And I'm toying with the idea of how much to involve the dog. I kind of like those books where the dog is a narrator, but I'm hoping that my writing skills will be good enough to make that work, because I think that would be a nice touch. It might not be the whole book, it might just be a few chapters here and there. But I've basically got the whole thing finished. Like I say, I've got about 80,000 words, but it's very rough. And so now I've got to go back and really focus on the story theory, which of course previously I knew nothing about. I just thought people just wrote a story and that was that. And having been hanging out with all these other authors, I realized there's character arcs and scene structure and things that I didn't really appreciate before. But I'm enjoying the process of learning about how to write. So I'm hoping that I'll end up with something that's at least a reasonable read. I'm not expecting any Pulitzer Prizes, but I would like it to be something that just makes you chuckle and feel good is the goal.
So are you working on your promotion? Because we all know that's a big part of getting your book out there. Are you doing any promotion for your book ahead?
Well, interestingly, having learned a lot in helping mom, I realized that it doesn't matter whether you're traditionally published or whether you self-publish, you have to do the marketing yourself. And so I have already set up my own website, and I'm starting to build an email list, because I understand that's the key to marketing these days. So I'm definitely giving it some thought, which I didn't with mum's books at all until they were in my hand. So with this one, I'm hoping I'll be a little bit ahead of the game in and by writing on Medium, which is the sort of online publication people may be familiar with, medium.com. I'm at least creating a little bit of a following. So I'm doing something.
Well, even this radio interview is something, right?
There you go. This
There you
radio
go.
interview is everything. It's fantastic. Yes.
That's
But
great.
I think being able to promote my mum's books and slide in, oh, by the way, I'm writing as well. I'm definitely trying to do more of that these days.
So thank you for tuning in to Northwest Book Talk. I'm Patty Grasher, and I hope you enjoyed our journey through the literary world of the Pacific Northwest with touches of England. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next time for more inspiring conversations with authors, coaches, and booksellers. Keep reading and writing. You can discover more about Sue Dockstader, her books and writing journey on northwestbooktalk.com or on kxrw.fm and click on shows, and then, of course, click on Northwest Book Talk.